It feels like we're living through some seriously turbulent times, a lot of change, a lot of chaos. But what if all this isn't just an end? What if it's actually a beginning? Today, we're going to dig into a really powerful way of thinking about this, a framework for navigating all this breakdown and finding the real opportunities hidden inside it all. So, the core idea we're exploring today is this. We're in a period of intense rupture, both out in the world and inside ourselves. But here's the crucial part. All this breakdown, this grief, this fear that we're all feeling, it's not just an ending. It's actually the potential catalyst for a huge evolutionary leap forward. Okay, so that's the big question, right? If a breakdown can actually lead to a breakthrough, how do we consciously choose that path instead of just, collapsing into despair? Let's figure that out. All right, first up, let's talk about that feeling, that nagging sense that so many of us have, that the world is literally splitting apart. It's this deep feeling of instability, like the very ground beneath our feet is starting to crack. Okay, I know this sounds super dramatic, but this ancient phrase is presented here as way more than just religious imagery. The argument is that it's a shockingly accurate metaphor for where we are collectively right now. So what's really going on here? Well, it's not some future event we're talking about. It's a description of our collective nervous system being totally dysregulated, right now. It's that deep anguish we feel when we see our systems collapsing or feel betrayed by institutions. Think of it like a global nervous system that's just swinging wildly between panic and rage on one side and then total numbness on the other. It's basically the unprocessed grief of an entire civilization that's under an immense amount of stress. Okay, so if we're all feeling this collective chaos, how do we even begin to make sense of it in a way that's actually useful? Well, that's where this core framework comes in: rifts, shifts, and gifts. First, let's talk about the rifts, and really think of them like deep cracks showing up everywhere. It's the political polarization that feels like it's tearing society right down the middle. It's watching old institutions we used to rely on just fail. It's that fundamental feeling that the world we thought we knew is breaking apart at the seams. Next up, you've got the shifts, and these are the whiplash-inducing changes happening so fast our nervous systems can barely process them. I'm talking about the explosion of AI, or hitting climate tipping points we can't reverse. These shifts are forcing us to adapt at a pace that just feels completely overwhelming. But, and this is the hopeful part, the really fascinating bit, we get to the gifts. The idea here is that all this immense pressure is actually forging new human abilities. Things like a deeper sense of empathy, a totally new level of global connection, and even a widespread understanding of trauma. These are strengths that, maybe, could only be born in the fire of this kind of instability. All right, let's just quickly recap this so it sticks. Rifts are the cracks. Shifts are the crazy fast changes. And gifts, those are the new strengths that come out of all that pressure. It's a simple but really powerful map for understanding all this turbulence. And here's a perfect way to see how this works with a real-world issue. Let's take the climate crisis. It's a huge rift in our relationship with the planet. It's a massive shift in our global ecological systems. But it's also a gift because it compels us to find new ways of working together that we probably never would have found if things were just comfortable. This whole idea of breakdown leading to breakthrough, it's not exactly new, is it? What if we zoomed way out and started to see today's crises not as some terrifying final end, but as just one part of an ancient repeating pattern? So you've got two totally different ways to look at what feels like an extinction-level event. The apocalyptic view sees it as the end, final, senseless horror. But the cyclic view, which you see in a lot of ancient wisdom traditions, sees it very differently. It's not about total destruction. It's about an old pattern just running out of steam. It's not an absolute end, but more like the ego death of a civilization, which opens up a portal for something brand new to be born. And a perfect example of this comes from Hindu cosmology, the idea of the Kali Yuga. It's known as a dark age, full of conflict and confusion. Now, what's really wild is that some modern takes on this suggest this very long cycle is coming to a head right now. From this perspective, all the chaos we're seeing isn't the end of the world. It's the messy, noisy, chaotic lead up to a major transition. The old way is just exhausting itself, making a new way of being not just possible, but completely unavoidable. Okay, that's all great in theory, but how do we actually stay sane through all of this? If we are living through the end of some massive cycle, how do we practically keep our cool in the middle of the storm? This next part is all about clear, actionable tools to do just that. So, the approach here is broken down into 4 key layers. It's a complete toolkit, really. It starts with your body, then moves to your emotions, then to your thoughts, and finally to how you connect with others and with a bigger sense of purpose. It's a way to stay steady from the inside out. Layer 1 is super practical. It's all about your body. And these aren't complicated ideas. They're simple, powerful things you can do. Slowing down your breath, especially making your exhale longer, sends a signal to your nervous system that you're safe. And hey, maybe limiting your news intake a bit, that stops your body from being constantly hammered with threat signals. These are the physical anchors you can use in a storm of collective panic. Then we move on to what's called emotional hygiene, and this is so crucial. It's about consciously making space for those tough emotions like grief and rage so they don't just bottle up and explode later. A key practice here is learning to tell the difference between your own feelings and this sea of collective panic out there. Just stopping and asking yourself, what is happening in my body right now, right here, can pull you right out of that global anxiety and back to yourself. And finally, we've got the last 2 layers, which are really about your mindset and your community. Cognitively, just framing events as part of a larger cycle gives them meaning, and making meaning is incredibly calming for the human brain. Relationally, building strong local connections is the ultimate defense against dread. And spiritually, seeing all this upheaval as you participating in some grand unfolding rather than just random horror gets you a deep, unshakable sense of purpose. All right, let's bring it all together. How do we get from that feeling of breakdown to an actual breakthrough? How do we actively make that shift? It all comes back to seeing it as a process, right? The rifts are the necessary cracks in everything that's old and just not working anymore. The shifts are those dizzying, rapid changes we're all trying to navigate. And from all that pressure, the gifts are new abilities for empathy, for connection, for resilience finally get to emerge. And that just brings everything full circle, doesn't it? That intense anguish, that weeping and gnashing of teeth gets a whole new meaning. It's not a sign of the end of everything. It's the emotional price we pay for clinging to systems, beliefs, and ways of life that are already on their way out. The pain comes from holding on so tight, not from the change itself. So that leaves us with one final, and I think most important question, and this one's for you. Knowing that the old ways of doing things are failing, and knowing that this very process gives birth to new strengths, what are you, personally, being called to create? As the old containers fail, what new capacities inside you are just waiting to be born into the world?